Today we are going to be looking at the Star Wars Retro Collection released by Hasbro in 2019, and all of them retail for Target for $10 except for Tarkin, who is only available on the Escape from Death Star board game, which is available everywhere for $20. As of me recording this video, none of these figures are, common to see on shelves. So how did I get these figures? Well, I just asked an employee at Target in the electronics section, and behold, they have them. I actually did like a couple Target searches, for me to get the entire set, so yeah, I definitely say it was worth it in the end. I don't have all the packagings for the guys anymore, but I have at least kept Luke. So basically these are what the packages for these figures look like. They're basically the same as the original vintage figures from Kenner, except there are some differences, like the border, shows like some shelfware on purpose. And then there's like a big sticker called Retro Collection, where you can remove it, but you're going to tear up the box if you actually do that. Unless if you like blow dry it or something. Also, the back is very different since, of course, it is a new line. And then there's like a description that reads, "The Star Wars Retro Collection is inspired by 1970s Star Wars figures and features original figure design and detailing. Continue your collection from the galaxy far, far away. Each sold separately, subject to availability." Then we have the characters, except for Tarkin. However, if you get the Tarkin figure from the board game, it does list Tarkin's name on here. So we have Han Solo, Chewbacca, Princess Leia Organa, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Stormtrooper. Shut up, Texie, I'm trying to make a video. That's just my cat meowing. So you can go to www.starwars.com, and you can also go to www.starwars.hasbro.com, and then you have the Disney and Hasbro logo. So here are all the figures, and let's take a look at them. So this is Luke Skywalker, and this is actually not Kenner and Hasbro's first attempt at replicating the original vintage figures, because in 1995, around the early Power of the Force era, where the guys had superhero proportions, there was a 4-pack, a classic 4-pack that came with a couple cards of screenshots from the film, but it came with 4 figures, attempt a replication of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. But I heard that they were not good quality, and the replication was a little poor. So, of course, judging by the images of comparing this figure to the original vintage one, they're basically the same. All the figures are the same, except for Chewbacca, where his legs are a little shorter. I'll get to him in a bit, but right now we're just gonna take a look at Luke. I really like this figure, mostly because of how flawed he is. I mean, his face doesn't really look much like Mark Hamill's, especially since, his hair is yellow, and if you watch the films, Luke's hair is not really blonde. It's kind of a lighter brown color. And there's actually a variant of him from the original vintage line where he had brown hair, and then there's also releases of him with the much more corrected lighter brown hair. Also, you can see that his belt buckle is not painted, nor is his lightsaber holder. And I'll get to the lightsaber gimmick later. Basically, this kind of looks like a Luke Skywalker cosplayer with really yellow hair. But he does have a really cool lightsaber gimmick that I arguably still holds up today. I really like this gimmick. So basically, there's this tab, and when you push on it, his lightsaber ignites. So okay, that was just actually awesome. Let's actually try this again. For some reason, Luke's lightsaber is yellow. I'm not really so sure why. I guess maybe if, Kenner wanted him, to have a unique color instead of just reusing the blue plastic for Luke, because Ben did come with the blue lightsaber. Also, not to mention that the lightsabers are ridiculously short, and especially since in the early releases of Luke, as well as the early bird kit set, Luke came with like a double telescoping lightsaber where, you would like push in the tab and this part would ignite, and this part it was like a separate piece that you would see at like the bottom, and you would try and like pull it out, and the lightsaber's a lot longer, but it was considered to be fragile, so they just went with this. Articulation wise, his head rotates, his shoulders rotate, and his hips rotate. Now, Stormtrooper and Chewbacca don't have head rotation, so they have 4 points of articulation. And unless if you count the lightsaber gimmick that Luke and Vader has, then they have 6 points of articulation. Overall, a pretty solid figure, and I really like this figure a lot, but probably just because of how flawed he is. In comparison, here is a Luke Skywalker figure from the Star Wars Power of the Force line, the later Power of the Force line, like say around the time that the special editions came out. This one definitely looks more like Mark Hamill, probably more so than any of the 6-inch Black Series figures do. I'll have to give Luke Skywalker a B+, because even though this figure is flawed, he is a really good figure and is well replicated. So here is Darth Vader, and he is a really cool figure. He's probably my favorite figure from this line, like not counting Grand Moff Tarkin. And I definitely think he arguably still holds up. Like, his mask looks fantastic, even if it doesn't have the details. Also, his robe is made of vinyl, and here's what the inside looks like. And the inside doesn't really look that accurate, but it's kind of hardly noticeable. And here's his arms. And yes, he does have that telescoping lightsaber gimmick, and he ignites it a lot better than Luke's. So, here's his lightsaber, and it is red as always. When he was re-released in that classic 4-pack, the lightsabers on both Luke and Vader's were kind of different, a lot more sturdier and better in my opinion, but the colors are like a lot lighter. Like the yellow on Luke's was kind of light, and same goes for Vader. In fact, it kind of made Vader's lightsaber a lot more pink than it did red. But of course, since this is a much better repro, 2019, the lightsaber definitely looks accurate to that original vintage figure. I definitely would love to get the original vintage Vader and like restore it. So yeah, so I'd probably give Darth Vader an A-. In comparison, here's a much newer Darth Vader action figure, and I definitely say the newer version looks a lot better in my opinion. So here is Princess Leia, and she is definitely one of those figures that has hold up to this day. Like, I definitely feel like she looks like Carrie Fisher. Also, like Darth Vader, she has the vinyl robe, this time in white. And she has the same articulation as everybody else, but she does come with her blaster. And now, there's a problem you might have with the retro figures, is that for some reason, the figures like don't really have like a good job. They don't really do an amazing job holding their lightsabers properly. Han Solo is like the worst at it, but everyone else, they definitely do a alright job holding their blasters, like this one. But if you try to move it, it'll fall. So, I'm not so sure if it's because like the fault of how well replicated the figures are, or if it's the fault of like the weapons, not being sized right. But for whatever reason, they don't really, do a really amazing job holding their blasters. I actually have my Jedi Master Luke action figure with me, and I decided to put Leia's blaster on his right arm, and he holds it really well. Like, it's very tight on it. Like, it's a perfect fit, so If you have a Jedi Master Luke figure from, like, say, Last Jedi line or the Solo line, then I definitely recommend putting the blaster on this Luke figure's hand. Leia is definitely a really good figure in my opinion, and that's why she gets a B. Here is Chewbacca, and in my opinion, he is the worst figure in the set when it comes to replication because, I mean, everyone else looks fairly accurate to the original vintage figure, but unfortunately this Chewbacca, I think they probably did that so, like, they wouldn't change the packaging, you know, for Chewie's size, but they made his legs shorter. But I definitely think he's a way better version than, like, the Han Solo figure. I mean, the Han Solo figure just sucks in my opinion, and I'll explain when I get to reviewing Han. But the good thing is that he actually can hold his blaster, or I wouldn't say blaster, but he does hold his weapon actually really well. Even though it's not, like, a perfect fix, but I definitely think this thing, like, makes up for it. So, he is still the classic Chewbacca action figure, even if he's not that well replicated compared to that of the original vintage figure. I also love the details on his face. It looks really nice. Even if it doesn't have any, like, head articulation. In comparison, here's the much better, accurately scaled Chewbacca figure. And you could definitely tell that the newer one has lots more details than the original one. Both are pretty solid figures, even if they have flaws, and I definitely would give Chewbacca maybe a B-. So here's Han Solo, the big head version, because if you don't know, the original release of Han from the vintage line had like a small head where they got the face wrong but the hair right, and then later on they made a big head version where they got the face right but the hair wrong, so pick your poison I guess. But Hasbro decided to go with the big head figure, you know, when replicating the Han Solo figure. They went with the big head one. And obviously he is pre-posed. This one, you know, for him to hold the blaster, and this hand for, I don't know, probably nothing. Even though his pants are black and not blue, he does have the red stripes on the sides of his pants. And I definitely think, even though the hair looks totally wrong in my opinion, I definitely think the face looks like Harrison Ford. But even though Chewbacca is the worst figure in terms of replication, this guy in my opinion is the worst in this line. Especially since everyone else can hold their blaster pretty decently, but this guy cannot hold his blaster at all. Like, even if I try, it always falls down. And I'm betting the reason why is the blaster, because as you can see, like, the blaster just does not really seem to fit well. I think the holder is a little too big for Hans's hand, and that's kind of a shame. But I mean, like, without his blaster, you just get some, like, just this random generic cowboy without his cowboy hat action figure that you can't really, like, do much with him since he only has, like, 5 points of articulation. I mean, the only thing good, like, you're gonna get with this guy is, like, raise this arm up and raise this other arm up, move his legs back to make him sing. This figure gets a C- in my book. I mean, the only thing good you're gonna do with this guy is just make him sing. So here is the Stormtrooper, and he's definitely one of those figures that has arguably aged well. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that these figures do have peg holes that you can, like, put stands on. However, these figures did not come with stands, but they do stand on their own for the most part. Here's what the back looks like. There's so many details that this figure actually kind of looks somewhat accurate to the film counterpart, even if he looks a little bit questionable. I definitely like the face on this guy. Yeah, he's gonna be an army builder for a lot of them. And just like Leia and Han and Chewie, he does come with a weapon. It is a blaster. However, it does suffer the same problem. Not as much as Hans, but definitely the example that Stormtrooper does a pretty decent job at, like, holding his blaster. Like, it's gonna be a little crooked, and he's gonna fall whenever you try to move it. It's in, where is it? Oh, there it is. So yeah, that's kind of a shame, especially since Stormtroopers are known for having blasters. But I do have a solution, because you know how, like, Han Solo's, his blaster does not, you know, fit onto his hand that well? Well, I tried putting Han Solo's blaster on the Stormtrooper, and it fits perfectly. Like, if you try to shake it, it won't really fall off. Like, I'm surprised that Hans' blaster, like, fits well onto the Stormtrooper's hand. Way better than that of Solo. So, if you want an army build, not only would you have to get a lot of Stormtroopers, but if you want to display all of them with blasters, try getting some, like, reproduction, you know, Han Solo weapons. Overall, the Stormtrooper is an A- in my book. Here is the board game exclusive figure, Grand Moff Tarkin, and he's not based off of the original vintage version of Tarkin, because a vintage Tarkin does not exist. It wasn't until the Power of the Force line and was when Kenner actually made, you know, Grand Moff Tarkin for the first time. He comes with the exact same blaster as that of the Stormtrooper, but he definitely holds it much better than that of the Stormtrooper, even though, you know, it's still the whole, like, fits him loosely. But I definitely have tried this with the Han Solo blaster, and it definitely fits better on him. Let's take a look at the face. He definitely looks pretty accurate to the actor that played Grand Moff Tarkin. You could definitely tell he's loosely based off of the Kenner figure because of, like, his eyes. And I also love his, like, clothes, like, a lot of, you know, the details on it. A pretty good figure, same articulation, you know, rotating head, rotating shoulders, though this one is pretty loose on mine, and this one's pretty tight on mine. And, of course, the rotation in the hips. So, I'm not trying to be biased because this is a newly molded figure, but this is probably my favorite in the entire wave of the retro collection. So, this is an A+ in my book. Overall, if you have the original vintage figures of the Target exclusive ones, then these figures are definitely an easy pass. But if you don't have any, like, original vintage figures of that specific character, then these are definitely a good, like, alternative. And I definitely recommend getting that Grand Moff Tarkin action figure from the Escape from Death Star board game that you can get anywhere. So, thank you for watching this video.